All right. Well, thank you so much, Christa, for taking the time to chat with all of us today. So I just want to maybe give you a minute or two to kind of introduce yourself and talk a little bit about some of the symptoms that you were dealing with before you started our one-on-one program.
Yeah, my name is Christa. I'm from Texas, and probably, really starting much earlier in about 2013, started having a lot of gut pain, and that was really my first time that I started experiencing just a ton of symptoms all at once. I'd grown up with a lot of chronic infections, and but in 2013 I had a huge acne breakout, which totally freaked me out. Started doing some research on gut health and kind of took that journey for a little bit. In 2015, just everything got really bad. I was having so much pain, horrible digestion. I had eczema popping up, which I had never had before. I was gaining weight. It was just not a good situation. So I kind of started on a journey. I kind of self-diagnosed myself after doing a ton of internet research with Candida. So I did a Candida cleanse, and that helped. And so over time and over, the years of like researching and trying things and fixing things, some things got better, some new things cropped up, and it was just kind of a mess. And really, in the last, I guess, in the last year before I started working with you guys, just had constant bloating, constant pain, fatigue, a lot of anxiety. I had seen a doctor and gotten some tests done and knew that I wasn't absorbing nutrients well. And so he, showed me all these things I was deficient in, put me on a ton of supplements, which really helped. I came home with like 13 bottles of stuff and was just taking so much stuff. And, I asked, was like, well, why am I deficient in these things? And he kind of did this. He was like, kind of did some questionnaires, did some muscle testing, and basically was like, hey, I think you have Candida. Let's go ahead and do another Candida cleanse. And if that works, great. And I had asked for a GI map. I asked for like a full test. And his rationale was, if we think it's Candida and if you do this protocol and it clears up, then we saved you the money of testing. Which I was like, okay, sure, I appreciate that. Looking back, and after I did my GI map, I didn't have Candida and would have much rather just tested from the get-go. And so I finished 2 rounds of his Candida protocol and was right back in square one. And I was just miserable. I was miserable. I didn't want to go anywhere. It was hard. Sometimes it was hard to walk. Was just so uncomfortable all of the time. And so I had followed you on Instagram for a while. And after going through what you go through, when you see so many doctors and you hear so many different things and you're put on all these different stuff, it takes a lot out of you in terms of, it took a lot out of me in terms of my willingness to trust health professionals, because I'd spent so much time and money and years and just felt like I was getting nowhere. So I really appreciated the opportunity to get to know you and your stance and just your approach on Instagram, because I knew, I'd been following you for maybe like a year and a half or more. And so I was like, okay, I'm tracking with this lady. I'm hearing what she's saying. I'm learning a lot from the content she's sharing. And it's her real root cause approach is really resonating. So yeah, I reached out and, consulted with you, told you my story, really appreciated your perspective. the cost was a huge like step for me for sure, because it's never an easy step to take. But if there's something I've learned throughout this whole process is, it's worth it, but it's worth it because you get one shot at life. You get one shot at this house we get to live in. And you can't take it with you. So you might as well use it while you have it. So that's kind of my journey and how I got to you. And we can kind of go from there.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you sharing that. Yeah. I mean, it sounds like even from, remembering back to when we first talked, that really even just your overall quality of life was just, your health was kind of taking over and preventing you from living the life that you wanted to live, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So talk to me a little bit about just the journey itself, like going through the program. Maybe what did you feel like you learned? What were the best parts? What were maybe the more difficult parts, and just, kind of your experience?
So when I came, I started in May, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Jumping in, I had, so this was at this point, it was like 2 months into the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
So we were, still actually May, we were still pretty in full lockdown mode. We weren't going anywhere. And I had, up to that point, had been experiencing obviously a lot of like digestion issues, but really, really, really bad anxiety. And at the beginning of the pandemic, I've always struggled with disordered eating, body image issues, but have mostly, it's always been in the background of my life, and I've dealt with it over the years. But genuinely 2 weeks into the pandemic, I like kind of flipped. And my gut bloated right away. So I had felt like I had a couple months there at the beginning of last year. I was like, okay, I'm tracking, I'm feeling pretty good. Maybe I'm getting better. And then literally the pandemic started, and I don't know what happened. I just like bloated up and then couldn't get it under control. And then I just felt like my disordered eating just totally spiraled. I spiraled. So by the time I got to you guys in May, I was just like I was a wreck. I just I was anxious all the time. I was sick. I just did not feel well. Having a really hard time eating because I was uncomfortable, because I was afraid of food, all of this stuff. And so that's kind of the mental state I started with. And we did all of our testing. And you just did an Instagram, a whole series about the calcium shell. One of the most fascinating things. So I don't really remember what my numbers were, but they were crazy. Really high calcium. And you talked to me about, hey, I see this a lot in my clients that have a history of like trauma or undealt with emotions. At this point, I'd been kind of hearing that a couple of times. My anxiety started to manifest physically. I was having trouble breathing. Literally, I thought I had COVID. I thought I had cancer. Like, I was like, something's wrong.
Yeah.
So I was starting to there were a lot of different voices and different people saying, hey, I think you need to look into this. I think you need to tap into this. And I've never considered myself a stressed or anxious person. But it kind of got to the point where I was like, I can't, it was just in my face. And so talking about the calcium shell was like, okay, there's something here. My body's trying to tell me something. And then so you really encouraged me to start counseling, which I did. And it's been life-changing. Addressing my anxiety and acknowledging that has been life-changing. And I think, so that was one of the largest things I've learned from you and from my own work, that the body will do whatever it takes to keep itself safe. And for me, diving into the ways that I did not feel safe, was a journey I never thought I needed to go on, but I really did. And to be looking at this chart where, my calcium is through the roof. And really the whole theme of 2020 was softening. And I just didn't realize how hardened I had become in a lot of ways. I was really obsessed with working out, emotionally pretty hardened. And so there was just a lot of looking at my life. It wasn't just I had high calcium on a piece of paper. It was I've hardened myself in a lot of ways, and it looks like my body's just followed suit. And so that was a huge wake up call for me to say you need to check in with yourself and dive into these things. And so I have been, and that's been really helpful and healing. And getting my stress and anxiety under control, it took a while. So a lot of my progress kind of was slowed down. For the first couple of months I was in the program, because I couldn't eat. I was just super sick. But once I really started to kind of dive into and address some of those things, was able to, Paula was great. She helped me so much working through a lot, and just helped me talk through the process. Because I'd come to her and was like, I'm supposed to be taking all these supplements. We know what infections I have now. We know what's going on in my body. I can't get anything down. I'm having a really hard time doing anything. And so she was really helpful in walking me through step by step. And I think that was a huge gift for me, is because the whole process can be really overwhelming, especially when you're dealing with symptoms. And then realizing that there's also this emotional stuff you have to unpack, but you're supposed to be healing. And so I was just kind of a mess, and she was really gracious and really helped walk through okay, well, this is where you're not kind of, I tend to come at things from like, this is where I need to be. And she's like, okay, well, this is where you are. So here's a baby step. Okay, here's a baby step. And just celebrated me the whole way when I felt like a failure and I felt like I wasn't doing enough. And that was really helpful. So I think one of the biggest things I learned was how connected emotions are with the body, and how healing is also that connection. And you really can't do one without the other. And so for years, I've been trying to heal my body and do all these different things, but there was a whole side of me that wasn't healed or even addressed yet. And so having the opportunity to really face that and go, okay, we have to deal with this now, was really helpful. And then of course, just the practice, because it's a 6 month, you've got 6 months, you've been told what you need to do. These are your recommendations. And then you have to like make yourself implement those things. I have to stop, and I have to do my detox protocol, and I have to make sure I put my castor oil pack on. So those types of things where it was just these intentional markers of really just self-care and making you slow down and go, okay, if you want to get better, you have to do these things. And it made me kind of really focus on myself in that way, and really focus on how limited I am as a person and how much it does take. If I'm going to put out, I have to be putting that much in. So I really learned not just how the body works, which obviously that was all really helpful. But I really I feel a lot more this year like I'm just much more of a whole person, and I'm able to kind of integrate my life in a much more smooth way.
That's fantastic. And it sounds like kind of what was missing from some of the things that you were doing before, even with another practitioner, is it was like, first of all, they were just guessing, kind of, it sounds like, but then it was just, here's the supplements to take.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And they didn't really guide you into all of the other important aspects of health, like the mental, emotional, like maybe the liver support, like incorporating self-care, right? And did you find too that practitioner, it was like, okay, I go to them one time, here's the recommendations, and the support piece was kind of missing from that intervention as well?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think, when I started to realize like, okay, I've done what you said twice now. I've spent a lot of money and it's not working. And so now my trust is broken and I don't want to talk to you.
Yeah.
um, so having, I think building that trust-based relationship is really helpful.
Good. Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, talk to us a little bit. I know there's, it's always a work in progress, right? I always say health is a journey, not a destination, right? I mean, all of us are kind of every day working on our health to some extent, but talk to me about where you are today versus, where you started before we started this journey with you.
Yeah. My gut issues are still not resolved. I am feeling a lot better.
Mm-hmm.
I'm feeling a lot better. Mentally and emotionally, I feel a lot more stable, a lot more stable.
Mm-hmm.
It was bad.
Yeah.
So I'm able to really just kind of like, I think one of the things I've learned, just like you said, I I tend to be so perfectionistic
Mm-hmm.
that, I know that I should be healthy. I'm checking all these boxes. And so I should feel a certain way. And then I'm not. And then I'm mad about it. And that's kind of been honestly how I operate a lot of my life is I'm doing all the right things. So I should have X, Y, and Z. And so, like you said, being open-handed with health and realizing like I'm doing everything I can. All that's left to do is to love my body and myself in this place that I'm in and know that it's going to get better.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and just kind of that like letting go portion is helpful. And I've noticed that I'm getting like, the more I'm letting go, the more I'm getting better. So I definitely still have some gut discomfort, which, we're going to retest and keep working on. I was experiencing a lot of hair loss and my hair is growing back. So that's exciting. My energy is a lot better. My mood is a lot better. I've actually slept solid through the night, a couple of nights this week for the first time. And I don't know how, like, I don't know the last time that I like went to bed and then woke up in the morning and that was it. And I did the other day and I was like, it's morning. It's not the middle of the night. So that was really exciting. Yes. So I think compared to where I was, the the largest kind of growth was just my mental health. And and I'll just say for anybody that's like on this journey too, it can be really frustrating to have all these physical symptoms and then for someone to tell you you need to work on your mental health or your emotional health because you're just like, well then that's just like it's not what anybody wants to hear. But I just want to encourage anybody that's in that place that coming out on the other side of it, I am so grateful. I am so grateful that somebody saw me when I didn't really see me, and was willing to say, hey, there's something inside of you that needs to be addressed that you're not paying attention to. And so it was discouraging starting off to feel like, okay, I'm coming here for all these physical symptoms and you're telling me to go somewhere else for my mental health. And it just seemed like a lot, but it was the best thing. It was the best thing for me. And I'm so, so thankful. So thankful. So that's been a huge victory and a huge help. But my hair going back was a really good sign. Oh, I had lost my period. She was like, I don't know where she went, on vacation somewhere. But right after I started working with you guys and implementing some protocols, addressing my anxiety, the month after I started to be like, okay, this is a real thing and you need to address this, I started getting my period back. And it's been regular and relatively symptom-free. So much to the point where I'm like, okay, you've got to stop sneaking up on me. I didn't know you were coming today. So that's been awesome. And just a really clear sign that my body's working again, which is great. So, and then even though my digestion isn't awesome and it still is like a tricky spot, I do feel like it's a lot better than where it was, and I'm not nearly as uncomfortable. And even when I am, I'm not so hyper focused on fixing it that I can't live my life. And that has been helpful for sure. Because it definitely, like you said, I was in so much pain or so uncomfortable. I didn't want to do anything else, but I was also so hyper focused on something's wrong, I have to fix it, that was all I was consumed with. And so now I'm able to be like, oh, okay, I'm a little bloated today. Well, we'll try again tomorrow, and it not kind of derail my whole life.
Yeah. And I mean, this is why we want to be honest with these conversations and not pretend like after 6 months, everything's hunky dory and everything's perfect, because that's not a realistic health journey, right? There are ups and downs. That's the reality of it. There's no quick fixes, right? It takes work. It takes a lot of hard work, and it takes being a little uncomfortable with certain things, like working on your mental, emotional health. But I applaud you for still having the faith, because some people would have given up, right? Would have just said, forget it, this isn't working, wash their hands of the whole situation. But you stuck with it. You got out of your comfort zone and, said, okay, I don't know why I have to work on this, but I'm going to do it. I'm going to try it out. Right. And that's really what the health journey is. And it's, I always say, like, what is 100% health anyway? Like, what would that even look like? Is anyone even truly achieving that on a, regular basis? So, to still see a lot of improvement after 6 months, even if it was a bit of an up and down, but, we're acknowledging that there's still work to be done, right? So that's really why I want to have these real conversations. So I appreciate you sharing all that and your amazing work and, all that you have learned and changed and incorporated and, all of that. So, kind of last question here is, what would you say to someone who's maybe in your shoes when you first started and who's having fear, who's having doubts, who's like, I don't know if this is going to work, because I think that's a big factor that keeps people stuck, right? Most of the time, it's not necessarily about the money, because I think if someone had a guarantee that something would work, most people would be willing to spend whatever it took, right? So it's not always really about the money. It's about the fear, right? Of, is this going to help me, and all of that. So what would you say to that person? Or maybe even thinking of it as, what would you have said to yourself, like at the beginning of this journey, when you had kind of those maybe reservations or fears popping up too?
Yeah. The question that I asked myself at the beginning to like get me going was, if not now, when? There's never going to be the perfect time. The stars are never going to align, and it's never going to make perfect sense. For me, I looked at my life and I was like, if I don't do it now, there's never going to be a better time. And so I had to just kind of say, okay, this isn't like going to Disney World. I'd rather, spend this money and fly to Europe but then I'd be in Europe and I wouldn't feel good. And so I think being able to be really honest with where you're at and say, okay, this is where I'm at. And has what I've done in the past worked? Because if it has, you probably wouldn't be in this place anymore. And so realizing that I needed, I had done at this point 6+ no, shoot, longer than that, like 8+ years of research and diets and supplements on my own, and it hadn't worked. And so I got to the point where I was like, I have to ask for help. I have to get help. And so, yeah, I would just tell someone who's, considering this, you can keep looking and you can keep diving, and there's great research out there, and you may find what you need. But we're not meant to do it alone. And I think that having someone to be a mirror for me was really helpful. And I thought I was a pretty self-aware person, and it turns out I'm not. So, we need to do this with people, and that is really valuable. And so finding someone that you can engage with, that you trust, that is going to listen to you and validate you, but also hold you accountable, is really, really helpful. And at the end of 6 months, again, like, we've both said, it's not that it's going to be 100% better. But you just kind of have to weigh, like, are you going to stay where you are? Are you going to make progress? And I can guarantee that if you take the time to help your body heal, and if you give it time and space and building blocks, it will do its thing. I really do believe that. And that's really your focus, and what you teach and how you operate is giving it the time, the space, and the building blocks. And so if you do that, there's no way that you're not going to feel or get or see some type of improvement. Again, you might not be flying to the moon, but there will be benefits that you would not have gotten otherwise. And it's worth the leap. I think it's worth the leap to find out.
Yeah. Well, awesome. Thank you so much, Christa. It has been a pleasure to be here with you on this journey. And I know Paula agrees with me. She, we talk on a regular basis, and she'd always brag about the progress. So, we don't do the work for you. You have to do the work, and you did, right? And you are, and you continue, to do things for yourself every day to support, your ultimate goals. So we congratulate you on that. And it's been a pleasure watching it.
Thanks, Sarah. I appreciate you guys so much. I really do.
Yeah, well, thanks. And we're excited to see where you continue to go as we continue to, check in with you. And like you said, do some retesting and continue to make that progress.
Yeah, me too. I have a lot of hope for it. I really do.
Good. All right. Well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys.